These are some of the things that make us different as entrepreneurs. And when we talk about economic development of nations, where else would you look at, or who else would you look for other than the entrepreneurs? We need to keep talking about entrepreneurship, because not only do they build nations, they build cities, they build people in their personal homes, and that's why we're here today to talk about entrepreneurship development and how unlocking technology will help us to achieve that.
Aspirations are to be bought out by someone else. So we don't have a lot of the long enduring successes that we really need to drive our economic development. And I think I already mentioned we put too much focus on creating stuff, not enough focus on understanding markets and opportunities. And for me, the final thing that I think we need to do a better job of, which I think is done very well in many parts of Africa, is that we have to understand that innovation is not just about making money. We have to understand that innovation is also about driving social inclusion. We have to understand that a solar cooker can transform as many lives and build social and economic inclusion as much as a new technology-based app. And I think in Canada, we still haven't, as much as we talk a lot about social innovation, as much as we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, I think we have a long way to go in really embedding those things effectively in our ecosystem.
An ecosystem is critical to any sort of development. You need to have the flow of capital in order for your ecosystem to boom and to survive. So there's three key things that I will speak to. Wendy did a great job of speaking to them at a really critical way. So we believe that you need access to capital, you need access to markets, you need access to talent. For your ecosystem to do well, you need to have money flowing in to the ecosystem. But not just domestic resources, you need foreign resources flowing. What we were not good at, we're getting better at in Canada and Toronto, in the corridor, is foreign investments. Much more domestic is still needed, right? But we're getting better at foreign investments. In any ecosystem, either here or in Africa, you need to have capital. Money needs to flow. That includes government, that includes private sector, right? But there needs to be resources in your ecosystem to flow. If there's no resources, your ecosystem will fall apart. The next piece is your talent. Again, if you are only looking at domestic talent for your business, your business will die. Like, research is clear that in order for you to have access to long-term growth opportunities within your local ecosystem, you need to bring in both domestic and foreign talent. Why? Because for you to grow long-term, you need access to foreign markets. So for you to grow, for you to sustain as an ecosystem, your market needs to be multinational. It needs to be across other growing markets. Either you sell into them, right, or you go into them and and having a space there. So those three things are really important. Access to money, capital, right, both foreign and domestic. Access to people, both foreign and domestic, and access to your markets. Why does it have to be foreign and domestic? Because now we're in a global society. It's a global village. You are competing not just with the person down the road. You're competing with the person across the continent, right? So you need to ensure that you are building your business for scale.
Line of the old expression, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach him to fish, feed him for life. And so entrepreneurship's the same. Funding's important, it's a luxury too. It's not a have to have. The key is for the entrepreneur, whether it's a young person, old person, whatever business they may be in, is to find where's the right place for me to get that training and mentorship. And we do have entrepreneurs that come to us who, as I said before, the one-man band, so to speak, or they're in a social enterprise, or they're in a nonprofit. We have a course just for nonprofits. They need the same education. If you're doing a social enterprise or a nonprofit, you need business savvy. That's where a lot of them fail. They've got big hearts, and they don't have a clear business strategy. Almost every business now needs to be a social enterprise, which we talked about earlier. So I would encourage any entrepreneur, whatever stage they're at, to find the right one. You don't just apply randomly, find what is the best organization, government, non-government, or meeting group, or online or offline, or a free webinar I can do, because this organization does webinars on basic business, whatever it is to get the brain thinking. And then as you're growing, you get an education, you will meet people, you will strategize, you will grow.
We have to continue to focus on women's economic empowerment and to think about entrepreneurship not just as an opportunity to build big businesses and multinational businesses and so on, but to recognize the potential of micro businesses, social enterprise, and so on. Because I'm a big believer in linking economic growth with inclusion. And I think there's so much research that suggests that if you leave half the population behind by framing your innovation strategy in a particular way, you will lose out in many respects. So I just, in case it doesn't get addressed in the other panels, just keep the gender lens front and foremost as well.
Full discussion, and I would like people to please clap your hands for that. Thank you very much.
I would like to introduce Aisha Adu from Ghana, representing both and Ghana. Thank you.
On the panel that innovation does not necessarily mean technology. And I think we're in an era where a lot of people think that in order for a company to be successful, it has to be directly linked to technology. Technology is a conduit for innovation, but technology does not equal innovation. So I hope you folks understand what I'm saying. And like you said, there's a lot of innovative ideas. And one of the things that I found, and this is like me sharing my personal story, is that like I didn't necessarily come into entrepreneurship because I got a point and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur. Don't do it, it's a trap. It was really because I recognized a problem and I felt like there was a way to solve that problem. So if you're thinking about innovation and it's not necessarily addressing an issue or it's not addressing a problem that a lot of people can relate to, it's harder for you to, not run into failure. And don't get me wrong, like I think a lot of times when you participate in all those incubators, they'll tell you, 1 in 10 entrepreneurs succeed. So out of the 10, you're gonna be like, okay, well, there's only gonna be one of you that's gonna succeed. And I hate that narrative because I feel like before I even get into it, you've already failed me, right? So I think if we change the way that we address what innovation actually is, which is 1, it's solving a problem. 2, I might not necessarily be using technology, but I'm addressing a solution to something that a lot of people have. And Africa, I'm sorry, I'm going to use that, Africa as a whole. I hate that term too, but the Africa as a whole, we see that a lot. I went to Ghana, I go to Ghana every year, and I was actually supposed to be talking about entrepreneurship. And one thing that I realized, and I don't think sometimes it comes to mind, is that everyone in Ghana, I'll use Ghana as an example, is an entrepreneur. From the lady that's selling the tomatoes on the road, to the lady that is hawking on the streets. They're entrepreneurs, right? They don't have the incubators that they've gone through to tell them about marketing, about sales, about all of those things, but they are hustling. And they're honestly, that just changed my whole perspective of what entrepreneurship is. So, yeah.
So Francis is a founder of Africans Young Entrepreneurs, AYE, and African Young Entrepreneurship Network.
I must say there are two types of entrepreneurs based on our platform. Africa's young entrepreneurs, over 90% of our database is MSMEs. So the young simplifies young businesses, and like Aisha said, these are entrepreneurs that didn't go through those incubators and stuff like that. So we like practical entrepreneurs, and there are two types: the needy one and the ready one. And that's what usually happens. A lot of entrepreneurs really believe that I need this for my business, I need this for my business. And when you come to a platform, we disperse funds like in the form of grants or seed capital to these entrepreneurs. We find out that a huge majority of them are not ready. And what do I mean by ready? Ready is, what's even business? What's entrepreneurship? Business is simply making life easier. That's it. Try and make it easier for yourself, and after you've gained that, try and make it easier for somebody else, and it can turn to profit. You know, when God made man, man made business. God said, go and cultivate the earth. That's telling you, go work, go become an entrepreneur. And from man now working, man realized, oh, I could make money from this. I started doing business, I started translating it into profit. So, what makes us fail sometimes is that we concentrate so much on the idea, and we don't even look at the process. You know what I'm saying? You think about this idea, it's so great, this innovation is brilliant, and you don't even think about what's going to look like in the next 10 years when I'm going to have about 100,000 people flooding the same system. Will I be able to accommodate them? Will I be able to hold them? And you see a lot of entrepreneurs now going down the drain because they did not plan for that, and they have no long-term goal towards accomplishing their own businesses. So guys, business is about making life easier, but before you do that, be ready. Thank you very much.
Wow, that's
we believe very strongly we are not interested in opening markets and building corner shops. We're interested in strategic projects. If you're bold enough and courageous enough to build, they will come. On that same stretch, we have the Deep Sea Port project. We've just awarded a contract to MBTS, a Dutch company, to do the port feasibility. That is sitting on the Atlantic Ocean, which means we would help decongest the congestion in Lagos and be a hub for the West African market.
You want to look at opportunities in Africa today, one of the first ones I would look at is what are people already buying that they're importing, and let's produce a domestic product far cheaper. And what this shows is that the dramatic increase of 6.4% expected in the future is going to become primarily coming from regional processing of food and beverage, global innovations, chemical and autos, and then resource intensive. Which means that it's not overly technologically advanced stuff. It's some of the easy stuff: tomato paste, chicken, poultry, beef, some of the things that people eat and want to eat every day. Foreign manufacturers have high market shares in categories that could and should be manufactured, produced in Africa, and satisfy the local consumer marketplace.
But so you find that the infrastructural gaps represent opportunities. So we can sit here and discuss them, but we can also sit here and take the opportunities. I told you about 75 kilometers contiguous Atlantic Ocean, yet there's no ferry service between Lagos and Ondo State, which is about an hour away. So the opportunities in Africa are such that in a lifetime, you would never be able to exhaust them. But the infrastructure deficit is huge. It's massive. If you want to travel, well, Lagos and Ghana, 45 minutes, but if you want to travel some of the West African countries, it could take you days. We should never be.
So maybe I could ask a question to raise your hands. How many of you are Canadians of African descent? So the vast majority of you are African diaspora. So in China, it was the overseas Chinese. In India, it was the overseas Gujaratis and people like that that went back. They got local finance, but the equity came and the smarts came from the people that had left and gone back. And people talked earlier today about the reverse brain drain. What would you say to the people in this room to excite them about going back to Africa?
I would tell them what I said earlier. When you go back to Africa or wherever you come from, you extend your product life cycle. That's the truth. Because I used to live in the UK and I was very comfortable doing that. But at some point, I thought I needed to give back more to society. Because there must be a point in your life where you're working for glory and not for gratification. In the process, you'll find some reward. There's no doubt about that. For those of you who are here or in any part of the world, the connections you have here, the access that you have to finance, marry it with your passion that you can commercialize and take it back home. You will make a killing. Simple as that.